It's a shame.
Yes, we are. We are currently live, I think. And I'm just going to double check it. But we have some guests today. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yes.
Can start with you.
Hello. My name is Brianna Cespedes.
And my name is Simon Sepson. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Yep. And I'm David Hernandez.
Oh, nice. Let's cut to David. There we are. Yes. I am currently just double checking the stream, but we are so glad you guys are here today. I just heard you on the radio the other night. Yeah, that was really cool. Do you want to share how was that experience?
Oh, it was really awesome. Honestly, being in front of the mic again, I really love it because I was a broadcaster in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
So
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was really fun. I'm really thankful. Thank you, David, for letting me come on. And just being able to share for that amount of time, that was like 20 minutes, almost 30, actually. I was able to share my full story, which is not common, especially when it comes to radio, because the biggest breaks I did in the military was 10 minutes. So I got to go full in length, and then it was fun afterwards. Got to meet a bunch of different people, talk about more bills that are coming through. Awesome experience.
That's awesome to hear. I thought your testimony of what you've been through was very interesting. And do you want to share some of that right now, just so we can get an idea and catch up and stuff?
Yeah. No, I'll go right into it. So I joined the military 2017, kind of out of high school age. And really, I joined to defend the Constitution. That was kind of one of my biggest motivations. I love the Constitution. I'm kind of a nerd about it. And honestly, when you swear in, you raise your hand and you say, I will defend against enemies foreign and domestic. And I didn't realize how much that would actually come into play later on, actually within the military. Just some of these ideas that I had no idea that I would possibly be experiencing while I was in. So basically, I was in 5 years. My contract was 6 years. And it was a great experience. The first 2.5 years, 3 years, I was stationed in New Jersey. And I got to be a broadcaster. So I was doing radio.
Wow.
I was doing videography, photography, journalism. Super fun. And my name was DJ Cubanita. I was playing like salsa music. I was bringing the whole Latino culture. Yeah, and people honestly really loved that new Latino side.
Yeah.
Because reggaeton, I didn't know, but reggaeton is like huge now. Isn't Bad Bunny like the
yes,
biggest
I
artist?
love Bad Bunny.
Yeah. So he's big time.
So you're gonna have to speed me up. I don't even know what reggaeton is.
Reggaeton? Okay, right. We'll type in Bad Bunny on the way home.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a lot of fun and a good experience. Overall, met a lot of great people. And then COVID came around. We all have our different experiences of COVID, right? Yeah. But for me, it started in Jersey. At first, it was just like, all right, work from home. That was great. I loved it. Yeah. It was awesome. I didn't have to come in, right? And then afterwards, it turned into really when I was moved over, stationed in Korea. That's when things really changed. I got sent to quarantine within my year in Korea. Over 6 times I was sent over there. So, and I'm not just talking like quarantine, okay, in your nice little apartment. I'm saying in the barracks room, in isolation, you're sent to a specific medical barracks. They call it the COVID barracks. Yeah. And you are in isolation. You are required to be there 2 weeks at a time. You have a little yard. It's called rec time, where you can go out 45 minutes a day. I looked forward to that every single day. So
sounds like prison.
It was pretty much the brig, right?
Yeah.
That's what you said, David. So it was a crazy experience because I didn't know that we could get to that point. Yeah. Especially for something that was it didn't seem like it really was that big of a threat compared to like Ebola or something where the science didn't really back up. I remember doing a lot of research in the beginning with COVID, with masks, with what this meant. And a lot of doctors in the beginning were like, hey guys, it's okay, you don't have to wear a mask. Just wash your hands a little extra. If you don't feel good, stay home, it'll be okay, right? Yeah. 2 weeks. Then I remember months later, I could not find those same videos. I could not find them.
Oh, that's kind of scary.
So why was that happening? They
Yeah.
were silencing our doctors. They were silencing the people that actually were still willing to step up or had the science.
Yeah.
And they all fell into one rhetoric. And when everybody is agreeing, something is wrong. Something.
Wow.
That if
Yeah.
the majority is believing something, who said that? Jefferson? Somebody said that. Somebody famous said that.
Yeah. Someone,
I
we'll
forget,
talk
some
about it
historical
later.
figure.
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean because I remember I was a chess coach when COVID was happening, and we had these kids coming back from China like right around Christmas, and then everybody was getting sick all of a sudden, and it was like I got really sick, and it matched the symptoms of COVID, but it was before it was before the news media said that COVID came to the United States. So it was like, but it was like, my experience and my like perspective and my best judgment was kind of, like you said, it was all just like, how it was deleted off YouTube. It was like, oh no, I'm not allowed to say that. It's just like weird. Like I'm not allowed to say that I think I already had COVID. Like, and I was pretty sick too. Like that's why I thought I had it because it felt like an elephant was sitting on my lungs.
Yeah. No,
but that was before
the
it
cancel
was.
culture with it. There was this whole you have to fit in, otherwise you are immoral or you are you would be silenced, and that to me was fear based. Which if it's fear based, there's something wrong too. So I think most people feel like the whole experience was very sketchy. I think most people, if anything, thought it was sketchy. So most of my peers honestly agreed with me. And as I looked more into it, I was like, okay, I can't do this.
Yeah.
My convictions, as I looked into the contents of this vaccine with the aborted fetus cells and all that, I was like, look, I can't do this. So I wrote up a religious conviction request, exemption request. Yeah. That was back in 2021 in September. And that was the beginning to a series of threats, of more quarantines, of being put into isolation, of being told you're going to get kicked out, of just all kinds of things where commanders spoke directly to me, not even through my supervisor, which is not a part of the chain of command that we have. So a lot of things that were pretty unlawful, to be honest, not according to the codes even within the military policies. Yeah. And that is kind of why I've come out to tell this story, because people know that we have military members that were removed from the military. We know that people have been kicked out. Wow. We know. I don't know if people know the amount. Close to 50,000 have been kicked out for this.
Well, I know that one of the things you said was that you were set out on a general discharge, right?
Yes.
And that, but it was like, sometimes people who are guilty of assault are sent out on a general discharge.
No,
yes,
exactly. So people who smoke weed, some who actually do sexual assaults, they get out on a general. Yeah. So I am equal with them.
Yeah, you've been categorized as
right.
That. No, I totally get it. I mean, I have people say to me like, oh no, COVID's not that bad. Like, why are you even still talking about it? But it was like I tried to, take classes at my local college, and they were like, where's your wristband? When I was on the campus, and I was like, what wristband? And they were like, your COVID wristband. And I am totally 100% proudly unvaccinated. So
there we go.
so I was like, I don't have one. And then they were like, well, you got to go. And so it's just like, okay, fine, whatever. I'll go teach myself. I'll go to the library. I don't care. So you can see, though, that, kind of we're still dealing with it. And also just being in a new country in itself. I mean, I've always been so intimidated by, joining like the army and that stuff. Yeah. And I mean, that's already a crazy shock, I feel like. So then the fact that you had all that other stuff stacked on top of it and it's working against you, and it's just like, that must have been really, difficult. But
yeah, and the pressure was there, but honestly, I was strengthened by a few people, the Lord and my dad. Those were two people that really were supporting me, were helping me. And honestly, when I was alone all that time, because I felt like, just being broken down, like in boot camp, right? They try to break you down to make you lose your identity. The same sort of thing was happening when I was put into quarantine back to back to back. I was like, this is not right. Like, how are you guys finding a way to be fitting within policy, quote unquote, but putting me in isolation for this amount of time. I mean, what about all that mental health talk that they do, all those briefings?
Yeah.
It was not healthy. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention being stuck inside all day. One of the worst things you can do for your health, you know.
Oh, it was.
You know
awful.
how it was like a big discovery that like sunshine helps COVID. It was like, yeah, like
Yeah. No.
my 3-year-old could have told you that. Like, so yeah, so you know, you're more outspoken now, right? It's because of this, isn't it?
Yes, honestly, I remember pacing back and forth from one wall to the other. You know, when I was, pacing back, I was just like, this is not right. This is unjust. This has gone too far.
Yeah.
Where I was stationed in Belgium after Korea.
Yeah.
And my experience there was actually worse because that was where I was actually being removed from the military. So I knew I was getting out already. But I ended up staying there about 6 more months.
Yeah.
And kind of just in this weird waiting period, stuck in isolation again, not being able to even go into a coffee shop on base because I didn't have the COVID passport.
Yeah.
The COVID passport was required to go anywhere, especially Germany. That place closed down completely. Belgium was following Germany.
Yeah.
And just the experience, not just on the military base, but for the civilians as well. I thought it would be a little different.
Yeah.
Because military, they'll be stricter. Okay, I understand. But even for the civilians with the COVID passport and that QR code and all of those things, I was like, where are we going? That's one reason I don't like QR codes because I have some bad associated with it.
No, I mean, it's getting weird. I was in Whole Foods the other day and they were like, you can scan your palm to pay. Like you can just, I was
No,
like,
they didn't.
I'm not.
Really?
Yeah. You can this is like how you can pay now. You just like hover it. No, go there. I'm serious.
No, this bar we went to, they said, sorry, we don't take cash. I was like, what?
We just take palm.
No cash?
Yeah.
It was, anyway, crazy stuff. So
No, it is really weird.
yeah.
But yeah. No, I mean, I have a similar thing. You know, I'm a young mom. I was very liberal, and then when I was 18, I found myself pregnant, and I went to Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood, you know, of course, they go, well, you know, they fearmonger you. And then so they fearmongered me, so I scheduled the abortion. And then God spoke to me on the way there, and it was just like, I haven't looked back. And so that's why I feel like I need to speak out, because I'm sick and tired of like these women being fearmongered. And I mean, it's so like normal too. Like, you know how many times I've been asked, like, why didn't you just get an abortion? Don't you have dreams? Like, you know?
No, my oldest sister, she's about to give birth in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
She goes with Kaiser, and she said she's been asked more times, especially in the beginning of her pregnancy, hey, are you sure you don't want an abortion? Are you sure? Like, are you positive?
Oh my
Do you know the
gosh.
repercussions of having a child? Like, almost as if they wanted her to have an abortion.
Well, they do. They do.
Yeah.
I really think they
it's
do.
crazy.
I mean, people can call me a conspiracy theorist, but it's just like, you know, I Googled teen pregnancy one time when I was pregnant, and it said like all these statistics like, hey, great news. Teen pregnancy rates have gone down, you know, which is saving taxpayers money, which is, you know, helping education and stuff. And then kind of in the article, they also slipped in also abortion rates are going up, you know. So it was like, why is this good news? Why? You know, okay. And yeah, maybe it's about the taxpayers, but I'm also a firm believer in trying to help, you know, empower women, but, which is like one of their anthems, you know. But I really mean that. I mean like
The good
I
way.
mean, yes, I mean that in the, like the real way. Like I had an organization who helped me so much, you know, and that's what we need to be showing women. You know, we shouldn't be fear mongering them and then you know, promoting abortion and making it seem normalized, which is what they're doing, you know. So but yeah, no, it's very very cool. And yeah, tell us about. I wanna hear some about because I heard that you are very young and you actually are. Well, just tell us about yourself, because I don't want to like get it wrong.
No worries. Yeah, it's thanks for having me on. I'm actually not native to. Thank you. I'm actually not native to the great state of California. I come from Washington State, and I was actually the state senator up in the sort of Pacific Northwest, top left area of Washington State. So I was the youngest state senator in the history of Washington. and a conservative,
amazing.
which
Yeah.
is oftentimes, as you know, young people our age generally do not necessarily lean this way politically.
Yeah.
But, I wanted to get involved partly just to say that the decisions being made right now, whether it's in Sacramento or in Olympia or in Washington, D.C., are going to affect your generation and my generation far more than they will affect the generation of the people making many of those decisions. And so my request with people is never that, I be given a free pass because of my age, but that instead I am judged by the same metrics you judge anybody else by, which in this country should ultimately be the content of my character and the quality of my ideas.
Yeah.
Those should be the principles that advance you. And so, this whole process of just getting to serve in the legislature and getting to get young people involved has really meant a lot to me, because we have so many challenges, as a state, as a country, and it makes me worried about our future. It makes me worried about the future that your daughter's going to inherit, and all of those things. And ultimately that's why we're supposed to fight. And I think the fight of freedom is one that's worth absolutely engaging in. And it may not be right now on a battlefield of bullets, but it may be on a battlefield of ideas.
Yeah.
And we have to be willing to engage there.
Absolutely. One of the things you said was that you don't want people to judge you based on your age, but do you think that they subconsciously do that? Because I feel like, you know what I mean? I feel like, whether or not you want them to, it's like you're still seen as young, and, they're going to overlook you even if you ask them not to. Wouldn't you say that you've noticed that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I'd be curious to hear even from somebody that's maybe not in our generation, what the perception is of young people.
We're only separated by about 52 years.
There you go. It's funny. I have thought about going to law school, and at this point, I'd probably be about 28 years old by the time I'd graduate. And to me, as a 23-year-old right now, that feels ancient. But I still know that I have a few more years where I can still call myself a young person. But it's just fascinating, I think, to engage as a young person in the political world. Because I think you're right. People do sometimes have that automatic skepticism, and that's why I think it's important for us to be articulate and confident about what we believe in, and again, willing to engage with all kinds of ideas. And I think in doing so, prove through our actions that we should be members of the conversation.
Yeah. I'm bummed that Ellie is not here right now. She usually does this podcast with me, but one thing she has told me is that, because she's like 17, I think, and she has said to me that people have come up to her and been like, "You're throwing away your childhood by getting this involved in politics. You're just throwing it away.
Well,
you could be 17,
Except by not getting involved, they're taking away the childhood.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
There are no sidelines.
And that's one of the things I remember telling people early on in sort of my journey was, if you look at history, we imagine the founding fathers as sort of being wise, revered old men.
They're young.
But there's plenty of reasons for it. But the people that were on the foremost battle of freedom, back in 1776 during our constitutional ratification later on, were young people, because they were the ones that had the most to gain. They were the ones that had the most to lose. It was their struggle, and it's ours.
My grandpa was a historian, and he said that one of the reasons that the draft is so important is because it pulls young men especially, into politics, because it's like, suddenly they have to care about who they vote for and what's happening in the country, because their lives are suddenly at stake. That was one of his firm beliefs for the draft. I always thought that was really interesting too, because it's like, that's a very good point. And that's how I feel, especially being a mother. I'm like, oh my gosh, with vaccine magnates, I'm like, no way. I don't want to even be a part of the school system right now.
Well, and you touched on cancel culture earlier, not to go back to the COVID thing for a second, but it's just so fascinating that, it was maybe a year ago around this time, we heard President Biden saying that if you got a vaccine, you didn't have to wear a mask. And then just a few months later, we were told that even if you have a vaccine, you're still supposed to mask. In some places, you're supposed to double mask.
Yeah.
And of course, you can say that, well, maybe we had some type of new scientific revelation, or the science changed or something like that, which is an argument that some people try to make, some in good faith.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you spoke out against it, if you challenged it at the time, if you questioned it at the time, there was not not this sort of scientific inquiry where, all kinds of ideas were accepted. No, you were canceled.
Yeah.
You were shut down, whether it be on social media, whether it be, people's careers that have been ruined, scientists that have spoken up about just the changing dynamics. Your life would be ruined for questioning the science, when the entire point of science is to have a genuine inquiry into its processes.
I know.
And he promised too, actually, President Biden did promise he would not mandate the vaccine for the military members. And he did that.
And then we were just told to ignore Grandpa. Ignore Grandpa! No, but anyway. No. But, so, David, tell us about why you, because you've spoken out about how important you think it is to, really get younger people involved in politics. Do you have any, advice on how, how people, I've heard parents say, I don't even know how to, talk to my kid,
Well, first of all, you need to listen to your kids and hear what they're saying. And then question, well, where did you hear that? What is that based on?
Yeah.
And because, unfortunately, I mean, and we have to talk about COVID because when I'm 74, so for the first 71 years of my life, I could have never imagined that how easily it was to shut down the churches, to shut down private businesses.
I hated that.
To shut down schools.
Yeah.
To basically shut everything down. And there was so much compliance.
Yeah. Computers.
And
it was
it was like all of a sudden, what happened to freedom? What happened to liberty? What happened to that? And so, especially young people now, they have found themselves here in California in a state where we don't have to think about what could happen. All we have to do is reflect. And if we think that is the only time that's going to happen, then if we get lulled back into complacency, they're going to do it again.
Yeah.
And because I think even those in power were shocked at how easily the compliance was.
Yeah.
I mean, when you had police officers, Breonna's story is very powerful. But on our show, we had doctors, we had the anesthesiologist, a leading anesthesiologist from UCLA, who refused to be vaccinated and was escorted off the campus.
Oh my God!
By security and was fired. And so we had him on the radio the very next day. We've had police officers, firefighters that were working out there, during the AIDS epidemic. They were out there treating everyone on the street. Didn't make any difference if they had AIDS or anything about that.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
And they were all kicked off. And they are still, kicking people out of the fire department and out of the police department as we speak, and not so much because it really comes down to is they're not complying, and Breonna, and I think that's what really, especially in the military, if unless you comply. If you're not going to comply there, where else are you not going to comply? And unfortunately, when we look back at World War II, and we look at the prison guards at Auschwitz and Dachau, and they were brought up on war crimes, their defense was, well, we were just following orders. Yeah. Well, sometimes, and so no one would have thought twice, well, you need to question those orders or disobey those orders, and now they're telling you need to just get in line, comply, and follow those orders.
Yeah.
And so, especially for young people, your rights have been taken away.
Yeah.
If you want to become a doctor here in California and you go against the narrative of what's coming out about COVID, they passed a law that will take away your license.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's terrible.
Or your children.
Yeah, and honestly, what's interesting is I have met more young people that actually did wake up because of COVID. And that is one thing to be encouraged about, because we have something like David said, to actually go back and say, hey, look, we can just reflect on what happened and how far they're willing to go. Yeah. How far are Democrats willing to go? How far is our leadership actually willing to take us, and how much control can they have over our daily lives? This affects us now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I honestly have seen a few people, they woke up after that.
Yeah. That does happen. In fact, I have kind of an interesting story. Actually, my whole thing is always abortion. That's what I know most about because I've been through it. But I have one story where this guy, I got to interview him. He was one of the first, like Planned Parenthood has sued him like several times. But he was this pro-life advocate in like the 70s or something like that. And him and his friends went in and broke into a Planned Parenthood, and they took photos of what was in the dumpster, and it was these piles of these little fetuses with bodies and bloodied, and they started handing out the photos outside the Planned Parenthood, and people were so disgusted. They were out there screaming like, "Oh my gosh, this is like the Holocaust. Like, this looks like the Holocaust," like the images of the bloodied bodies, and that's when and it did change minds. Like, it was instantly making people hate Planned Parenthood because they saw the truth of it. And so when people see the truth of something, it can be extremely powerful. And I think we are seeing that with COVID. I've had people even sound more and more, conservative who would have never sounded like that before. But anyway, after that Planned Parenthood, they started cracking down on where they would put the bodies. They started putting them in Tiffany blue, these Tiffany blue barrels, and shipping them to who knows where. Who cares, right? It's not really a life. So that's kind of, that was the backlash of that. So you can see how it is an information war, information is extreme power. That is why I do this. That's why I come out and I do any of this, because information is power. And that's why I try to get more involved into media, other forms of entertainment as well, because information is truly powerful. It will change minds. Testimonies will change minds. My testimony was your story is enough to, I think, change somebody's perspective, because it makes it real and it makes it no longer, just some hypothetical thing. It's like, and I think that is how we communicate to people now. And I think that's how we reach them is we make it click. We make it click with their life.
And I think that's why, like this podcast, like our show on LA Talk Radio is so important, because up until now, with the exception of maybe national news, like with Rush Limbaugh or Dennis Prager or some of that, they have a very select audience. Usually they're already conservative and they're listening to that. And so locally, you have the media, the narrative is dominated by the liberal media. And so all of a sudden we emerge and we're starting to ask questions and say things like, well, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, let's remove God and religion from the picture. How do you explain? And I used to ask, how is it that 19% of the population gets 40% of the abortions? And though, I said, let's forget about the morality. Let's just talk about math. And so I was talking to a young lady, and she goes, David, blacks are 19% of the population, but not all of them are able to have kids. So you remove the males, you remove the seniors, you remove the young, and you have 3% of this country's population having 40% of the abortions. How do you justify that? And so whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, if you want a woman's right to choose, how do you justify 3% getting 40% of the abortions? And that is in the black community. So what happened to Black Lives Matter?
Exactly. And now that sounds like racial targeting to me.
But we know how history is being erased, because history. It's very easy to say, well, America was systemically racist. Well, let's talk about slavery. Not every state was a slave state. When you start looking at North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, those were Democrat states. And so, there was systemic racism within the Democratic Party when we had slavery here, but you had hundreds of thousands of white heterosexual males die in the Civil War in order to free the slaves. And basically, I think, people forget that it was the Abolitionist Party, which were the Republicans, that stood up to that issue. And granted, we hear a lot, today say, well, let's don't talk about abortion. The law's been settled. Let's don't talk about these certain things. Let's don't talk about the social issues. What if the Republican Party back when slavery was enforced, what if they decided, okay, let's just talk about finances and the economy.
Yeah.
Let's get along with the Southern Democrats. We don't do you really want to go to war over this? And so the fact that we're speaking about it brings us to the forefront, the history of who the Democratic Party was, and if you're having 3% of getting 40%, it kind of seems like they still are.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean, it's funny because the clinic, like, it wasn't in like a nice suburb area that I was gonna go to. It was in like they put the clinics in like the more ghetto areas for some reason. I wonder why. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and yeah, I think normalizing it in conversation is very good. Even in like. I'm just gonna bring up this totally random show that I love. It's called BoJack Horseman, and and they had a whole episode on abortion. And I don't even know. They're probably woke, like knowing everybody else. But it was funny because in it, they had this long setup and conversation about abortion, and they seemed to hit like every side of the argument. And then in the end, they made the girl who got the abortion, they made her just seem like so like, just, I don't know what the word is. They just made her seem like a wimp. I think. And but that's the kind of truth that you start seeing when you start talking about it, and I mean, when it comes to slavery, it's interesting because there was actually like cultural there was entertainment and reading about slavery, and you can see that like Uncle Tom's Cabin came out, right? And then people were like, oh my gosh, slavery is actually kind of bad, because of this book. And then so the South came out with their own book, and they named it Uncle Tom's Cabin, and they made the slaves seem more like how, like more like an animal instead of as a human, which was the revolutionary idea of Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was, this is wrong, these are people. And they were trying to combat Uncle Tom's Cabin with another form of entertainment, and they masked it. So that's why you have to break through it. You have to break through all of the noise. You have to tell people that, yes, we should be talking about abortion. Yes, we should be talking about how ridiculous it is that you can't go into a Starbucks without a vaccine,
Actually, I have been one of the ways I'm forcing myself to be more courageous is actually when I meet somebody new. Like today I was at the pool, and this lady started talking to me, and I was like, she asked me my story, and I couldn't avoid it. I can be like, yeah, I got out of the military last year. But actually, I say, I was actually kicked out. I was discharged from the military. And they're like, oh, you got kicked out? What'd you do? Like, you must have been like, so bad, right?
You do?
And then I go into the vaccine. And either I get a person that, like, will step away, right, and kind of end the conversation.
Unclean.
Right. Yes, unclean. Or actually, I've only experienced that about once, and I've at least told, I don't know, I've been here a year now, so I've told a lot of people, right?
Yeah, wow.
And most people are like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
They actually did that? I didn't know they did that. And most people, they don't care. They want to actually know more. Yeah. And I think for our generation, we are often just trying to get along. There's
I
this peace
that.
type thing.
Don't make waves.
And there's a lot of like the
get
hate
along
speech.
To go along.
Yeah.
The waves.
But in our generation, a lot of us are like good people that generally want to be getting along, right?
Yeah,
and
I've noticed that.
And I think a lot of us do actually. We would be willing to speak about something if someone brought it up first.
Yeah.
But why not be the person that brings it up first? Just have a little courage and see what happens.
Yeah.
I was going to say we were talking about even the history of slavery. I'm reminded of William Wilberforce, who is the man largely credited with the abolition of slavery in the British Kingdom. He was a member of Parliament, and he was adamantly opposed to slavery. And he would get up in Parliament and he would begin to speak out against slavery. And as he did so, one by one, slowly, the other members of Parliament would trickle out of the room until he was alone in the room speaking by himself to the point where his voice would grow hoarse. And the advice that he got from the other members was not to speak out on such a controversial, unpopular topic at the time. You know, there were plenty of tariffs that they could have argued about. But he had a conviction, and he stood by his conviction. And it's the reminder that there's power in our conviction. There's power in passion. And he was able to change a nation there, and in doing so, help change the world. But it took an individual with courage to go up against the whims of the time. You know? And I think it was G.K. Chesterton who once said, "Fallacies do not cease to be fallacies merely because they've become fashions." We have a lot of very fashionable fallacies and a lot of unfashionable facts lying around right now. But ultimately, if we care about our kids, if we care about the world our grandkids will inherit, we think that it's worth it to fight against these fashionable fallacies and for these at times unpopular truths.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, and with history being erased, and it's definitely not the history that is being taught in public schools and even private schools today is very selective. I had a gentleman on my radio show who was in the march on Selma when they went over the bridge, and they encountered the state troopers with police dogs and whips and fire hoses and stuff. And you know, he was talking about, you know, racism and that. And I said, let's see, state troopers. Who oversees the state troopers? Isn't that the governor? And he goes, yeah. And I said, oh, wasn't that George Wallace? And he said, yeah. And I go, a Republican. And I said, no, he was a Democrat. You know, and so here was somebody that was involved in the march, who was a civil rights leader, grew up to be a civil rights leader, and the lie has been so refined that people either selectively forget, or that they've just come to this illusion that it is the Republicans that are the party of racism, when it's the exact opposite. Yeah. And so I think and we were talking Simon before, is that this whole issue of reparations here in California. I think this is a great opportunity because people are talking about who's going to get paid. Is it going to be $5 million a person or $368,000? Now you have Governor Newsom kind of backtracking, saying, "Well,
I don't like that guy.
It's just it's not just about money." And so what I bring up is, okay, it's fine to talk about who's going to get paid, but let's talk about who's going to pay. Because since California doesn't print its own money, that means it's going to be taxpayer money. So who pays the taxes? And does that mean that Mexicans are going to have their tax money going toward reparations? Yeah. Does that mean that, who exactly? And also, since we know that the Democrat Party was a party of slavery, I'm all for it. If you're a registered Democrat in California, and you pay for it, and you want to stick with the party of slavery, then 10% of your money, of your assets, needs to go toward reparation. And in those reparations, we want to include descendants of the hundreds of thousands of white heterosexual males that died on the battlefields of Gettysburg and Shiloh, and that lost their lives in order to break slavery here in the United States.
It's crazy to hear you say that argument right now, because I remember in high school there were these two kids having a debate, and one kid said that, and all the black kids around him got so heated, and I also was heated. I was like, that's racist. But looking back, I'm like, I don't even know. Like, a lot of these, with kind of my conclusion lately is, those kids in high school who are pointing the finger, racism this, racism that, it's like, you haven't experienced racism. You're not your grandma, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you know what I mean? That's my whole thing lately.
I don't even go there. I acknowledge, that something horrible took place, but let's place the responsibility where it belongs. Yeah. And, unfortunately, when we look at California, the laws that are now coming out, because they passed like 1,000 laws, every session. Yeah. And Republicans are irrelevant in California. Every statewide office is held by a Democrat. The Democrats have a supermajority in the Assembly, supermajority in the Senate. You look at Los Angeles, you have 5 supervisors, 4 of them Democrats. LA City Council, 15 members, 14 are Democrats. Republicans are irrelevant. And so all of the challenge
so
that
true.
we have with the homeless, that we have with crime, that is all under Democrat leadership. And
and
you
that's
know,
just
what
facts.
I was talking with Brianna over the weekend was that, you know, I think the time has come is that let's start placing a responsibility for these challenges that we have and the people that vote for them. Now you can claim ignorance only so long, but what we just went through, everybody knows who was in power. And so if it's okay to shut down your churches and your schools where you now have these kids committing suicide at an incredible rate
I know.
as young as 10 years old, if you're okay with that,
That's real. That's real. The high school that was up my street, a kid jumped off the building at lunch, and it was just like, and they just the school's solution was to just put up bars so you couldn't climb up there anymore. But it was like, that was so creepy. Like, I think that alone made me like never want to put my kids in public school, because something is wrong.
I was gonna. I don't know that I'm on the same page with you in terms of reparations. But I think it's just the classic reminder that the dream that Martin Luther King Jr. famously talked about was one where people were not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Yes.
And all of this discussion in California, that is obsessive over identity politics, is one of the best ways to encourage people to continue to discriminate and dislike each other.
oh, absolutely.
And
That's the whole point.
Yep, exactly.
Divide and conquer, and that's why
Divide and conquer.
that's why I think it's so important for young people to get involved in politics, because for me, I've always looked at politics. I think politics should be a noble profession.
Yeah.
But if good people don't get involved in politics, it doesn't remain a vacuum. All of a sudden, we get the people in there that get in there because for power, for money, for all of the things that go with being a corrupt politician.
Well, yeah, it's true. I mean, the long-term incentive is like you will have a better like community, you'll have a better government. It's long-term incentive, and I think right now a lot of people, at least, around my age, they're always wanting to get into something fast. There's the incentive is really like overnight. Like I have a lot of friends from high school that unfortunately went into selling drugs. Because it's just like, oh, that's quick money. So like it's there's that, and then there's I mean, there's, I don't know, like, it's the incentive, I think right now they can't see it because they haven't really, like, I think we're seeing another guest we've had on the show, his parents are from a socialist country. So he has the incentive of, I don't want to ever, like, experience what they had to experience, it was awful, and we really don't know because we haven't experienced it yet. But I think, we have to really keep the incentive of why you would have to get involved in politics, because it doesn't pay a lot because of corruption, and it doesn't, it doesn't have these, like fame, you more like it canceled, So it's like...
Well, politics, I mean, the job is defined as a civil servant.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it has the word servant in it. So I don't think we should have people going in to gain. It really should be to give.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And that's the kind of heart that I think young people have. I know so many people that just want to help out. They want to help. And this is one way, like, to give and help.
But I was going to say, they oftentimes don't want to. They want to help out. And so you say, well, have you thought about politics? And their automatic reaction was, of course not.
Right.
Because it's considered to be such a dirty sort of industry. And I'm using that word quite properly. Unfortunately, it is an industry.
Yeah.
When... and of course, the response is it's only going to stay that way with that perception if good people choose to stay out of it, because of. And I mean, there's so many reasons in this country to still want to be involved in those things. I mean, as cynical as it is for us to be about the nation that we live in, I mean, this is still an extraordinary land. I mean, it's the reminder that, as it's been said before, you could move to Japan, but that does not necessarily make you Japanese. You could move to Germany, but that does not make you German. But here in this country, you can come from any corner of the world, and you can become an American. That is something that is special and something that is worth fighting for.
No, and speaking
Absolutely.
of that,
amen to that.
Yep, May 24th at the Pasadena Convention Center, you're going to have 2,600 new American citizens being sworn in as citizens. So, and that is possible. And we will be there to make sure that they have the opportunity to register Republican.
But I mean, it's so good
Tranquility
that you're
Club.
going to that, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that people, you know, I mean, I remember it was actually when I was at the White House for a time, you know, just witnessing a naturalization ceremony there, and just the, you know, the emotions, the expressions on people's faces to become an American is something that, you know, if you've grown up in this country, you become distant about. And you know, to just see the joy on their faces, to say, you know, they clearly believe that this is a place worth fighting for. They clearly believe in it. Why don't we? You know,
Yeah.
why don't we have that same
That's
hope?
so true.
And to value that, especially, I mean, I'm come from Cuban and Mexican. On my dad's side is Cuban, my mom's side is Mexican, and both immigrants, right? And they coming over it from Cuba. I mean, we people know about Cuba, right? And what my grandparents actually lost. We were this family, a part of the political. We were lawyers, we're successful, all of this land, dairy farmers, and nothing. It just taken away, right? And having to restart and come here, and they are so proud to be American. They are so proud to be Republican. They're so proud to be in California and actually to fight for the freedom. Actually, my abuelo, he was in CAR, in the California Republican Association, CRA.
CRA.
Yeah, and he actually helped Ronald Reagan in his
wow.
campaign. So, but like that activity, right?
What's his
people,
name?
Henry Cespedes.
Oh,
Is his
okay.
name?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Where does he live?
in Calabasas.
Yeah, I know him.
Do you?
Yes.
That's way over there.
I was gonna because I think, well, that name is the last name is familiar. It's like, wait,
Yeah.
it's Henry.
That's
yeah.
what, yeah.
Oh, that's
my
crazy.
family,
Wow,
so-
that's awesome.
But yeah, just I mean, coming from in that mentality, like we do not take freedom for granted because
Yeah.
it's so it's so easy to lose.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we don't realize as young people. Hey, freedom is something we
Yeah.
have to fight for. It's not automatic. You have to keep fighting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we unfortunately do have to wrap up early tonight, but I so much appreciated all that you guys said about, you know, why to get involved. And look, it's doable. I mean, he's the youngest guy right here to be in. So it's possible. I didn't even know that. I think that there needs to be more you know, outspokenness about that, because I didn't even know that you could run that young.
Yeah, I
didn't know that.
actually.
So yeah, there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of stuff happening there. But anyway, yeah, any last words you guys want to say?
Can I, so I actually, just really quick, I created a group called Involuntary Veterans. That's kind of what I tagged us. I made a Facebook page, and I also did write an article. So if I can share that information, if anyone knows any military members
Absolutely.
that got kicked out, same as me, I'm trying to get people together so they know they're not alone.
Wonderful.
So,
Yeah, and I'll spread the word too.
awesome.
Any last words, David? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, and be sure to check our website, Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club. And no, we don't meet in the phone booth because there are a lot of us, and it's gone from 16% to almost 25% Hispanics voting conservative because they're sick and tired of Democrats taking us for granted.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So that was everyone. All right. Okay. Thank you guys so much, and I'm going to stop the stream now.